So, Marco, thank you for being with us on the contemplative path. Marco Schorlemmer is a meditator in the WCCM. We've known each other for many years. You're an excellent coordinator of the Catalonian region in Spain and a member of the WCCM Oblate community as well. And you lead a meditation group in the university in Barcelona. Those are your meditation credentials, and your professional credentials are that you are a scientific researcher into artificial intelligence, working with the Spanish National Research Council. And thank you for agreeing to give this series of talks in a way that will eventually bring these two dimensions together into a focus on a very important topic for modern thought and for our way through this cultural and scientific crisis, perhaps, that we are passing through. So in this talk, you're going to address the question of technoscience as a product of human intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Lawrence. As you said, I'm a researcher in artificial intelligence. I've been doing research in this field for about now 25 years, since the mid-1990s. And well, I don't know how this scientific and engineering discipline, artificial intelligence, resonates with you and the other listeners of this talk. I don't know if you look at this kind of technology with hope, or if you look maybe with skepticism, or even with fear. I don't know if you consider yourself a techie, or maybe a Luddite, or maybe a little bit of both. So, but the late world-renowned physicist Stephen Hawking, together with 3 other prominent scientists, wrote in a polemic and influential Huffington Post article on these hopes and dangers of artificial intelligence. And they said that everything that civilization has to offer is a product of human intelligence. They said that we cannot predict what might be achieved when this intelligence is magnified by the tools artificial intelligence may provide. So they argued. But the eradication of war, disease, and poverty would be high on anyone's list. I think that such a narrative could be seen as a kind of 21st century technoscientific version of our mythical aspiration to regain the paradise from which humanity fell. And we hope that today's scientific and technological endeavors, such as biomedicine or genetic research or artificial intelligence, they all will eventually mitigate our sufferings, such as the one that humanity is currently going through with this global COVID-19 pandemic. And among these products of human intelligence that Hawking and his collaborators talk, is obviously also the discipline of artificial intelligence itself and all the other technoscientific disciplines. And by technoscience, I mean this entanglement of modern science and technology together with its practices and methodologies, and the close relationship it has with today's socio-economic system. So I think artificial intelligence, the field that I'm working on, is quite a good example of this complex entanglement of science, technology, and socio-economic system at play. But then the attention when reflecting on the technosciences, such as, for example, AI, artificial intelligence, or genetic engineering, or nanotechnology, etc., I think is primarily done on its outcomes and its effects. What are the scientific theories? What is the knowledge they produce? What technological products do they generate? What service do they provide? And what impact does all this have on society? And I think these are for sure very important issues to reflect on. But my personal impression is that very rarely the spiritual dimension of the actual professional practice of the technoscientist is made explicit and brought to the foreground. And what do I mean by this spiritual dimension? For many, it may feel strange and even contradictory in terms to talk about a spiritual dimension of technoscientific practice. But what I want to point is at this dimension of human intelligence that nourishes the creativity at the origin of all technoscientific knowledge and products. This dimension that breathes life into our technoscientific activity, so to say. If you allow me to use this ancient metaphor of the spiritus, of the breath. So, which is what makes technoscience possible at the first place. And I think any scientist and engineer will tell you how good it feels when they experience the inspiration of their scientific inquiry and of their technological development, and when they appreciate the beauty and value of their scientific theories and technological applications they are contributing to create. And in this series of 3 talks, what I would like is to do precisely that, to look at this dimension of human intelligence that operates implicitly in technoscientific practice, and which I think brings us in harmony with this creative freedom that originates in all reality. And before moving on, I first need to confess that I take very much inspiration in the work of my former doctoral advisor and friend, Jaume Agustí, and almost everything I'm going to say in these 3 talks are his thoughts. Although he would say that thoughts do not belong to anybody, and what then I just do is I add my own pinch of salt, and I hope that I have not ruined the flavor of the original ideas. So, as a society today, we are facing very important challenges: poverty, social inequalities, climate change, armed conflicts, and these societies we're living in are technoscientific societies. They put a lot of hope on these technoscientific solutions to their problems. And I think this is also the main hope we are currently have to overcoming the global pandemic that is hitting our planet. We're putting the faith on technological tracking of COVID-19 cases to control the spreading. We do biomedical research on better drugs and cures for those that are suffering the disease, and so to mitigate the consequences and to decrease the mortality rates. We ultimately hope to develop safe and affordable vaccines that will allow us to go back to life as we knew it before. But I think that we need to look beyond these goal-oriented, problem-solving mentality of technoscientific approaches, and to reflect on this spiritual dimension of human intelligence that ultimately shapes the technoscientists it produce, and consequently it shapes the reality we are living in. And I do not mean that we should not work towards goals, and we should not stop our development of novel scientific theories and development, and to develop new technological tools that may help tackling all these challenges of society. I mean, I would not be a researcher in artificial intelligence if I was thinking that we should stop all this. But I often miss a more thorough reflection on this spiritual dimension of human intelligence, which turns out to be absolutely necessary if we want the techno-scientific solutions that we come up with to be true witnesses of human creativity for the common good. And so let me go back to artificial intelligence, which is my own field of research and that I know a little bit better. We are now going through a wave on unprecedented interest in artificial intelligence and on its impact on society. And this puts a lot of attention on this phenomenon that we call intelligence. But what is it? What do we understand by this term? So how do we conceptualize intelligence? If we go a bit back in history and Western thought, since the ancient Greeks, has put a lot of value on possessing intelligence. Although the Greeks called it primarily reason and rationality, which was seen as a core part of the intellect. And it determined what a person was allowed to do. And the lack of it has been used to decide what a rational being could do to irrational ones. To be ruled or to be ruled, to be authority or to be subordinate, all depended on possessing reason or not. So Aristotle and his Politics paved this way of thinking. He argued that it is natural and expedient for the body to be governed by the soul and for the emotional part to be governed by the intellect, the part possessing reason. Then he further noticed that all men that differ as widely as the soul does from the body, and this is the condition of those whose function is the use of the body, these are by nature slaves, for whom to be governed by authority is advantageous. Consequently, he said, authority and subordination are conditions not only inevitable, but also expedient. In some cases, things are marked out from the moment of birth to rule or to be ruled. Furthermore, the same holds between man and the other animals, he said. Tame animals are superior to their nature to wild animals. Yet for all animals, it is advantageous to be ruled by man. And finally, the male is by nature superior than the female inferior, the male ruler and the female subject. So intelligence or reason is, according to Aristotle and to all Western thought that originated from ancient Greek, that what set us human apart from the rest of creation. And also thanks to Aristotle, it acquired this political twist. It put humans to rule over all creation. Even worse, it set free men to rule over slaves. It set men to rule over women. It justified slavery, racism, colonization, misogyny, and our current domination and exploitation of animals and of natural resources. No wonder that we fear super intelligent machines. My God. According to this logic, they will end up ruling us. But well, Darwinism, in a way, I think, transcended this view of this all or nothing view of intelligence by introducing degrees of reason at different stages of evolution and allowing us to ultimately talk about the intelligence of animals or even that of plants. Then later on, with the advent of modern psychology, intelligence became a subject to be scientifically studied. And these various degrees of intelligence to be measured. However, we still look at ourselves as having the highest degree of intelligence of all life forms of this planet. Today, many scholars advocate also a much broader understanding of intelligence, which goes beyond this narrow view of intelligence based on reason and rationality alone. I think you may be familiar with Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. And nowadays we distinguish between visual spatial intelligence, linguistic verbal intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, logical mathematical intelligence, musical intelligence, bodily kinesthetic intelligence, and other kinds of intelligence have been later suggested to be added to this list. But still, I think there are certain aspects of our current understanding of intelligence, even in the case of this more richer view of multiple kinds, that go largely unquestioned, namely, that intelligence is somehow correlated to our capacity to learn, to adapt, and to succeed in the interactions with our environment. And that we can say to have more intelligence if we better learn, better adapt, and better succeed. And then that intelligence can be attributed to individual entities, that we can attribute it to persons, to animals, or to plants, and eventually also to machines. But I claim that this understanding of intelligence touches only one aspect of this phenomenon, which we might call the functional dimension of intelligence, because it focuses on what intelligence is for. Its function for adaptation, for problem solving, for attaining goals, for success, for survival. But in addition to this functional dimension, I think it is fair to say that there is also an evaluative or axiological dimension of intelligence, one which provides meaning and value to what we do with it. It connects us to the aesthetical dimension of life. Artists, for instance, exploit very much this dimension of intelligence. And this distinction of functional versus axiological intelligence is orthogonal to Gardner's kinds of intelligence, because we can talk about this axiological dimension in any of these multiple intelligence. We can have intense aesthetic dimension, we can have intense aesthetic and meaningful experiences while appreciating a painter or architecture in our visual spatial intelligence, or while listening to or performing music in our musical intelligence, or while moving our body in dance or sports in our kinesthetic intelligence, or while getting an insight of a mathematical proof in our logical mathematical intelligence, or while reading or reciting a poem in our linguistic verbal intelligence, and so on. But this axiological intelligence, like the functional intelligence, is relative to our needs as human beings. Both depend very much on our bodily, sensory, motor interactions with our environment, and they are conditioned by our biology. We function very different than other living beings, and what is meaningful and of value for us human beings might not be for other creatures of this planet, which also having as well functional and axiological intelligence of their own, they will always be relative and according to their needs as living beings. And this understanding of the functional and the axiological dimension of intelligence, namely that it is relative to our contingent needs as human beings, this understanding frees us from getting caught within this reality we functionally conceptualize and axiologically experience. This reality we sense and make sense of in a particular place and time in history. And so there is this liberating understanding that lies at the core of our intellect. And it is tightly connected with our capacity of speech and of communication by means of language. Language introduces a level of abstraction to our experience that empowers us to inquire, to deliberate, and to generate and share knowledge. But at the same time, it has this selective character, picking out certain aspects of our experience and leaving others out. And in this way, overlooking important parts of the meaning of our experiences. If we look at the word intelligence, it is interlegere, from inter, between, and legere, which means to pick out. So that is to grasp the space that arises between the picking out that happens in this abstraction process of language and conceptualization. So the etymology of intelligence points us to what ultimately intelligence is about, to this space in between. So we need to take this liberating core into account, in addition to the functional and axiological dimensions that I have just described. This liberating intelligence transcends our human needs and is the source of our capability of understanding, of our it is the capability for changing and understanding. How can I say it? This liberating intelligence is the source of our capacity of changing our understanding of reality, to respond creatively to it. It somehow transcends our humanity. There would be no Greek thought and no understanding by Aristotle on the role of reasoning, authority, and subordination without this liberating core of the intellect. And the fact that we can question this understanding and rethink the role of reason in society and in our environment today, so as to make it more apt to the challenges we are facing today, is also this result of our core capacity of detaching from the models of reality that we have been creating and changing along history. So breaking free from our models of reality requires this liberating core of intelligence. So, and ultimately, this liberating core transcends our conceptualization of human intelligence itself, because all this discourse that I just have done on intelligence and its dimensions is but another product that is relative to our human needs and our human understanding. So to wrap up, it is in a way sensible to say that in certain activities, it is the functional dimension that is more prevalent. For example, when we try to get something done, to solve a particular problem. In others, it's the axiological dimension that gains relevance. For example, when we apprehend the meaning and value of a given situation and its wholeness and integrity. And in others, it's the liberating core which is emphasized. For example, in those intense moments of creative thought and inspiration in which we experience ourselves as absolutely free. However, although we speak of these two dimensions of intelligence and of its liberating core, all of this is always acting jointly in this phenomenon that we call intelligence. And although it might be sensible to attribute functional and axiological intelligence to individual beings, and to define and to model and to measure these dimensions of intelligence, all this does not make sense at all when it comes to this liberating core of intelligence, because this core frees us from our attachment to definitions, to models, to measures, and even to the notion of individuality itself. To this liberating core of intelligence, there can only be one phenomenon that we call intelligence across all reality. And ultimately, this one intelligence is at the origin of reality itself. It constitutes its creative freedom. Not an origin and creativity in the temporal sense, but in this more constitutive, ontological, essential sense. Humanity's wisdom tradition have given it many names, or even considered it unnameable. Here I have only made the attempt to frame it in terms of its role in the phenomenon of intelligence. And I claim that many of today's problems in our societies originate from us giving too much emphasis to the functional intelligence in life. That is, to the problem-solving dimension of intelligence, to the detriment of nourishing its axiological dimension, and also to fail to let this liberating core of our intelligence to be in permanent touch with the creative freedom of reality itself, liberated from the relativity of our human needs. But that will be the topic of my next talk.
So Marco, thank you. A very clear and provocative opening of the question of intelligence. And if I could ask you a couple of questions that come to mind, and I'd also like the other people who will be listening to this to feel free to send in their questions or comments, so that we might generate a discussion on this, which you might be able to respond to as well over time. I think the first thing that struck me was the confidence that you, and I think other experts in artificial intelligence have communicated to me, that they don't seem to feel the fear, the popular fear, that we're going to become pets of supercomputers, as James Lovelock imagines. We're all going to become cyborgs, so we're all going to become pets of the machines that we create, or the idea that we have failed as a human species, and therefore the best thing we can do now is to reinvent ourselves by bioengineering. We recreate ourselves. So both of those seem to me to be sensationalist, if not rather desperate, evasions of the questions and of the challenge of what humanity means. And so I think you've identified that, and you obviously are not controlled by that fear. However, I would ask you this question. It seems as if we can create amazing technologies that have great potential, and then see them become Frankensteins, or we imagine they become Frankensteins. And this seems to have happened in the area of social media, for example. I don't know if you saw that documentary, The Social Dilemma, in which the creators of social media from Silicon Valley from the last 10, 15 years are now reacting rather like the inventors of the atomic bomb by wondering why they did this and how on earth did these consequences happen. And the particular area that they were concerned about, and it's a deep concern, a conscience concern, is the way that we are being shaped by the algorithms that not only get us to buy things, but actually shape what we desire, what we feel, what we want. So do you, although there's no logical reason to fear that human intelligence could be colonized by the machines that we create, is there a self-fulfilling fear that we could fall victim to, that we do collapse into the technological miracles and the addictive miracles that we create? So even though it's not necessary, could it happen?
I mean, exactly. I think we need to as a society, we need to frame very well the fear that we are having and where we are focusing on it. So obviously there can be risks, important risks, and we should be very aware of them in this kind of technology, artificial intelligence, but also in others. And but we should not be distracted on where the problem is. I often see that there's a lot of discussion by AI experts and not AI experts, or in the media or popular culture or whatever, on these fear that there will be super intelligent machines that are going to dominate us. But I think that is a distraction. It's not where the fear, where we should put our attention to. The attention has to be put in what the weak axiological and liberating intelligence we are having in our society, that we're putting so much emphasis on this functional intelligence. And then when things work wrong, like with the social media or with the atomic bomb or whatsoever, then we say, oh my God, what have we done? But why haven't we been more intelligent in the first place, and try to focus how we develop these technologies, and not just thinking about, oh, we have to automatize everything, for example. Why should we automatize everything? Well, I mean, what is reasonable to automatize and what not? In what can a very highly skilled functional intelligence, the ones that we are programming in computers, be very useful for us, but then to understand the meaning and the value of the application of this technology in our society, where do we cultivate this kind of intelligence? Or where do we cultivate this liberating intelligence that help us to develop this functional intelligence? But it seems like that as a society, we are not focusing. We're very poor axiological and liberating intelligence as societies, and have very highly skilled functional intelligence, even programmed in algorithms and so on. And I think that is a risk. That is a risk because we could apply technology to do things that they shouldn't do, like when they talk about trying to taking decisions, court decisions or medical decisions, or using these tools that can be very helpful for physicians. I don't say they cannot. I mean, they go through a lot of data and extract patterns, and that is very fabulous. But then to grasp the meaning of that and to really take the decision that is then very important for a human being or for society and so on, that is a skill that I think is under, or as an intelligence that is developed in our societies, and that is the danger, that we do not do too much emphasis on one side and we forgot this other side, and this can be in danger. So if I fear these technologies that come from AI or genetic engineering or all these other nanotechnologies, what I fear is that we are going to apply them with very poor axiological and liberating intelligence, and that is a danger. So currently with the application of artificial intelligence, and it can go that direction, and that is something that we have as a society to take into account, and not to get distracted on other stories that are really not the problem.
Thank you. Which seems to suggest then that because the conclusion one might draw from what you've just said is that there's really nothing to worry about, because we only have to realize that we need more liberating intelligence, and in order to control the functional intelligence, which and to do that for the common good. But that implies that the people who make the decisions or apply, use, or commercialize this technology are concerned about the common good rather than their own, financial good. And this is something I think that has to be confronted. And it may be that this is where we need to shift our economic model, from the contrast or the opposition between private capital and public policy, and recognize that private capital alone can't make those decisions. Those are decisions that have to be taken by the common mind, which is represented by some kind of political intelligence, if there is a political intelligence. And if there isn't, we are in a terrible situation. I suppose that even was what was lying, maybe in one sense, behind Aristotle's fear and Aristotle's, and Plato's fear of democracy. Anyway, the next question and second, the second part of your talk, where you talked about liberating intelligence, I think most meditators would identify this as what meditation helps to strengthen or develop, or make us aware that if we're going to live well and wisely, then we need to liberate this liberating intelligence, which is our natural capacity, or spiritual intelligence, it might even be called. I was just going to ask you, and I know you'll be talking about this in the other talks, but it sounds to me as if this liberating intelligence relates very much to the insights of the mystical tradition into the apophatic mind, to that other way of knowing that we call unknowing, but which is just another way of knowing. And the otherness of this way of knowing is that it is free from the constraints of the models of reality that we have created. So it's liberating us, as you said very clearly, from the models of reality that we are living in, self-constructed. So is there something innately iconoclastic about this liberating intelligence? You said that it was post-individualistic, or at least I wrote that down, post-individualistic, takes us beyond the individualistic model. But is it also, in a sense, iconoclastic? It dissolves all models, all structures.
Yes, I think it does. I think this contemplative practices, as meditation. I mean, they help to free us from any model that we have. They don't, maybe the word iconoclastic, I don't know if that's the right term to use that, because it's not that we are destroying them, because these models are very useful. And science is based on that. And but they change over time. And the way we understand reality in the 19th century has nothing to do with how physicists would understand it in the 20th. Maybe some ways of thinking about reality still are very I don't know, very stuck in the mentality. They take times to change them, but cultivating this liberating intelligence through meditation, for example, is a way to detach from these models, and and with our axiological intelligence to value them, to value how they are useful and in which situations a model is useful and can bring us forward for something, and when we have to let it go and find for other ways that are useful for our societies. I think these mystics and figures of the past that have had a very highly developed liberating intelligence can help us in their in finding also and cultivating our own today. But they were living in their societies with their problems. So we need to detach also from the way they were applying it to their societies, and we need to find our ways to apply it with the problems of today and with the way of thinking of today. But to cultivate this level, this dimension is very, very necessary, and we can learn a lot from these figures of the past that have done a lot of that have worked on that liberating intelligence, and that we have maybe as a society today forgotten, and we have put too much emphasis on other aspects.
Okay. I think it calls to mind the idea of Simone Weil of a new holiness, appropriate and recognizable in the conditions of our own time. It's a curious phrase, because you might think holiness is holiness, but the holiness of a Saint Francis or of a Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, for example, in their cultural context, is very different from the way we can be holy today, or whole. In the same way, maybe the intelligence we're talking about is also maybe the way we understand this intelligence or understand ourselves is different from the past, as you're implying. It almost sounds as if, in becoming aware of the nature of this liberating intelligence, we are doing something similar to, or even part of, the discovery of, quantum theory, and that this is another dimension, but it's a dimension that doesn't replace, as it were, the dimensions we're familiar with, say the functional intelligence or the axiological intelligence. These still are necessary, but as the liberating intelligence becomes more self-aware, let's say, this is going to have functional benefits for functional intelligence and the way we use our technology.
Exactly, and I mean, and we are talking about these three dimensions, but these are again metaphors or a way of talking about it. But basically, we are working only with one intelligence, and the other are always there. Only that maybe we are not so much aware of them, or we don't cultivate them or nourish them enough. But they are there, and if I have a very uh, if I have a system that nourishes my selfishness a lot, and I only try to focus on my own benefit, I mean, it is there. It is a very poor axiological intelligence in terms of the value that it has for all humanity. Only thinking of me it's very it's a very poor level, or I don't know so if to say the poor level of axiological intelligence.
Mm.
But then all the effort that I'm doing on the functional side, in the tools I generate, the theories, the scientific theories that I develop, are driven by that, are driven by the selfishness, right? And so it's not neutral. I mean, it's not, there's no an objective reality that we discover and then it is like this. We create it with the theories and the models, and we are constantly creating our reality. And if we don't cultivate these other dimensions, we can create a monster of a reality, right? Which is where a few people maybe are very successful and the rest suffers, but then also these few will also suffer at some point. So yeah, it always, this intelligence operates in all our activities that we do, but we need to bring them more to the foreground, let's say.
From a spiritual or theological point of view, you might say that the human being is capable of creation, but has been created with this gift of creativity. That we can invent things and see things and almost maybe not make things out of nothing, but we can make things new and make new things. But just as we have innate gifts which can be abused and or become dysfunctional and become oppressive, so even our divine quality of creativity can be misapplied or can become hijacked by let's say more selfish or lower levels of our intelligence. So, thank you very much. We look forward to the next one, and it's been great to spend this time with a contemplative scientist. Thank you very much.
Thank you.